right, Jeff. So long time no see.
It's been a minute.
That it has what, like June, July ish, when you came out for the family reunion.
I think it was July. Yeah. Yep.
All right. So I know you moved. Um, you still getting settled in over there?
So I closed on my house in October, and yeah, we're still getting some things finalized, but starting to feel like home finally in Kansas City,
So are you on the Missouri side or are you in the Kansas side?
Kansas side.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's about how far is that from Wichita? Like an hour, a little over an hour.
2.5.
Oof. You can see I don't ever venture out that far. All right. And so were you working for the same company you were working for when you were in Milwaukee?
No.
No, different company?
Yeah. No. I now work for a country club out in Kansas City.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. So how are you liking it there as opposed to where you were up in Milwaukee?
It's good to be closer to Kansas and Denver. It's more my style. I don't have any regrets about being out in Chicago and Milwaukee area. But it's good to be back in the Kansas City area for sure.
Yeah, I'd imagine that it's a little bit more of a natural transition going back into that area as opposed to when you first moved up north.
Yeah, got a lot of roots in that area.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I know we had spoken over the phone earlier on this week, talking about like the work ethic that like where did you get your work ethic? Because it's obvious when we're in your environment when we would go out and visit you in Wichita, and we would see you on your day to day. There was always steady movement. You're always working on something, whether that be at the house or at wherever you were working. Like, was that something that was instilled in you growing up, or was it something that you kind of learned as you started to mature?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of both, really. I think I grew up watching both my parents working their tails off all the time and getting after it, and just always watching people around me, seeing that if I'm going to do something, I want to be the best at it. I'm not saying that I was the best necessarily at anything, but I'm going to be the best that I can be at it. I don't like just settling for anything, so if there's something more to be able to be done, and that's what I'm going to try to do with it. And I think that's just from an early age, always the way I was. So, yeah,
Okay.
paid off long term.
Yeah, no, for sure. It puts you in a much better situation to go the venues you want to see fit, like whether that be in your workplace, like in your work environment, you kind of get to choose, as opposed to where if you just settle for everything, you take what is handed to you.
Right.
So you don't really get to control much of your destiny in that kind of situation, and it's very obvious also in knowing you that because you put so much work in, you have the flexibility to where if you don't like a work environment, you are able to drop everything and move into a different kind of venue.
Right.
And then I guess in turn with that also comes more of like the financial health is how I would word it. Being incredibly cognizant of what you have coming in as opposed to what you have going out, making sure that I guess your portfolio is broad and that you have multiple different things that you're seeing come in and also go out as well. And I know that's something that we had spoken about as well earlier on in the week is just kind of getting your insight to it because everybody has a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to gaining wealth and then also what the long term is goal financially.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I mean, everybody has their own view of what rich means and how much money they need to live. I don't need to be driving luxury cars and the biggest houses and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to live in a nice house that's comfortable and want to be able to go do the things that I want to be able to do. But certainly, as far as financial wealth, I mean, you just got to think about how much you need to be bringing in and what you have to do to get there and what is your value. And continue to go out and increase your value till people are paying you what you're worth. And I think that that's one of the things that I've been fortunate that I've worked in a lot of different places where people recognize the value that I can bring to them, and I'm compensated well for it.
Yeah, that's definitely a critical part of it is finding those that value your time, your work ethic, and then just also some of the natural born skills and capabilities that people have. And so kind of staying in that vein, when was when did you come to the realization that being, because are you, correct me if I'm wrong, are you still like considered a tennis coach, or are you more so considered like a personal trainer at this point? Because I know you kind of double as both.
Well, we haven't caught up, but my life has really changed in the last few weeks.
Oh, okay.
So when I moved back to Kansas City, I was head tennis pro at the country club, and so that's what I was doing. And then about a month later, there was a change in the organization. I was promoted to the director of racket sports for the whole country club, overseeing some other things. And then about 3 weeks ago, there was another change made, so I actually am now the general manager of the country club. So I've got a whole lot more on my plate now than I did 6 months ago. So I am still teaching tennis, and I'm still a tennis coach. But, expanding challenges in my career right now. I'm also in the process of now learning how to run a restaurant, because that's now under my jurisdiction as well, and learning how to run a pool. That's something that I'm going to have to be responsible for as the summer rolls around here, and the fitness programs and everything. So, yeah, no, I mean, I still teach tennis and personal training on that aspect. But now it's more on the business side of things, where I'm going to be a bigger role in the administrative side of things and continuing to grow.
Okay.
Continue to grow the career.
What's that learning curve like coming from your background, transitioning into the business side as opposed to maybe more of the like personal side of it?
Well, I mean, I've done this before. I was the general manager when I was in Chicago area, so it's a little bit different because that was mostly a tennis-specific situation. But, I was running a lot of the numbers and handling all the financial side of things when I was in Wichita as well, working for the city. So it's a little bit different because, again, I've never worked in a restaurant before, and that's a little bit different animal. But I like the challenge and working into those types of things and being able to see and run the numbers. And I come from a business background with my dad, and my early years at Blockbuster, I rose through the ranks pretty quickly and was into management and seeing the numbers on all that kind of stuff as well. So I do have some background with the financial side of all of those things and the marketing, but yeah, it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I didn't even know you worked at Blockbuster. Was that like in high school?
Just after, yeah.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, because I know that's a big thing that my buddy and I were kind of talking on in the last couple of weeks is there's this thing that most people have where when they're given an opportunity to do something that they're not normally used to doing, or there's challenges, impending challenges that come with those transitions, people kind of, I don't want to say necessarily fold under the pressure, but it makes them a little bit hesitant to welcome those situations because a lot of people are very uncomfortable with change. Is obviously, like you said, you've had a lot of shifting kind of skill sets that you needed to have for the last few jobs that you've carried in different locations you've been. Is it something that you greet with open arms, or is it kind of situationally whether or not you're excited for the new challenge?
Oh, I'm always excited for the new challenge. I mean, that's kind of the growth mindset that I try to have. I think the first obstacle that I remember going into when I first moved up to Kansas City the first time around back in 2006, '07, I guess it was, and how quickly I was able to go from not knowing anybody and turning that into a very successful career there. It's like, okay, if I can do that, then I can do just about anything. And so that's just the attitude that I've had since then, that I've shown myself that there's really nothing that I can't overcome if I, bear down and get after it. And obviously you got to have the right mentors and people around you helping you. You don't do anything by yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Contrary to popular belief, but I've been fortunate that I've always had good teams and good people helping me out and helping guiding me. And I have that to this day. I've got a lot of good mentors that still have my back now.
Okay. Yeah, I know definitely that it's, like you said, contrary to popular belief, nobody makes it anywhere in a successful situation on their lonesome. It takes a village. And so kind of understanding that, especially in your original transition out into the Kansas City area, I've got to imagine that it comes with its own set of challenges putting yourself out there, especially I know it's not the farthest move, but it's not like you went from Wichita to Kansas City. You came from Denver into Kansas City. And so those challenges socially are a big thing for people because again, it's something entirely different. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, especially in a move of that significance. Is there anything that you kind of experienced through all of your different transitions that made it easier each time around to be more accustomed with that?
Just basically that people are people. Everybody wants to be successful, and as a whole, most people are good people in general. So I think that's really what it comes down to. Everybody's trying to survive. So I think that's the way you got to approach it.
Yeah, definitely. I know kind of in my particular industry, because I come into contact, or my particular position, I would put it, you come into contact with so many different people. And it's still something that I get accustomed to because obviously I'll be in, like for this last week, for example, I started in Buena Vista, Colorado, and worked my way into Albuquerque, New Mexico, all the way down into Las Cruces, New Mexico, then out to Amarillo, Texas, Turpin, Oklahoma, and then finished out in Liberal, Kansas, before heading into Denver. And it's something that is unique to each person in each area. Is everyone kind of does their own thing, but to get back to your point, like everyone's for the most part, their beliefs are all the same. And I don't want to say necessarily beliefs in a big overranging term, but in how they handle people, how they handle situations, and obviously apples to oranges, but there's things to be taken from both and used in both, and that's a big thing that we're trained in our individual company, that if you go into it with the right mindset, more often than not, these people are going to be welcoming, they're going to be customary, and no one's going to treat you any less than you are.
Right.
And so that's something that I've learned kind of, and it's not necessarily a transition, but it could be used that way because you are going across so many different cultures and coming across so many different people and environments. Is there is that what you kind of see is the end goal, kind of where you are, or like what's your aspiration currently?
I don't know if I have an end goal. I just want to keep climbing and seeing how far I can continue to take things.
Okay.
I mean, with the organization that I'm with, there's more steps that can be climbed. I mean, it's a little insane how quickly this has happened in the last 6 months. Certainly did not see it coming, but there's still room to grow, and there's things that I want to learn how to do. Again, as I said before, I'm all about wanting to be the best at what I do. So there's a lot of things I have to learn to be better at the job that I now have, to continue to be a better leader, a better coach of people in general, not just on a tennis court, but in the entire company. And as I learn through all that, then maybe it's time to step up and go into something a little bit bigger at that point. But I think goals are good, but at the same time, you want to just continue to see how far you can go.
Okay. That brings me right to my point, because I'm of the mindset where I have a long-term like end goal. This is where I need to be. This is where I'm going to work to be every day. And it's definitely, I would say you're probably the first person I've ever come into contact with where there's not necessarily, like you have almost, it's kind of this thing you see in sports when, like, for example, there's the famous Kobe interview in the finals where they're like, "You're up 2-0. Is there any celebration? What's to celebrate? Job's not done."
Right.
So it's kind of a similar mindset I see from the outside, where you don't necessarily have, like you said, you don't have a long-term goal. You have a day-to-day goal, which in turn drives whatever motivation you have.
Right.
And I'm kind of the same way, but a little bit different oriented. It's like I see the end goal, and that determines what my day-to-day goal is, if that makes sense.
For sure. For sure.
And so kind of coming into contact with that is an interesting thing, because I guess they both have their benefits, and it almost makes more sense to go into it with a day-to-day goal, because then you don't lose sight of what you need to do that day. And you don't ever, like, it almost doesn't leave you an opportunity to procrastinate in any way.
Right. I mean, you got to take the small steps every day to get to the end game. But I would say that I made a pretty major mistake when I was in Wichita. When I took the job there, I had made a goal that I was going to be able to break even within 5 years. Well, we did it within 4 years, and so after reaching that goal, there was a lot of lost motivation. It's like, all right, we already did everything that I set out to do. Now what? And so that's where, I mean, I really didn't realize we were going to be able to attain that goal that quickly, but that was the learning point for me going forward, that, okay, it's good to have a goal, that's step one, but then, can we do more? Can we do more? Can we do bigger? And that's where, I mean, it is good to have, some short-term goals, but you got to make sure that you have long-term goals that you continue to reach for, because as soon as you start reaching one, then if you don't have something else to be driving for, then you slow down. You don't want to keep slow. You don't want to slow down.
Yeah, it's kind of, in my experience, it almost sounds kind of similar to, like, what's the term? Like a championship hangover. Like, you have this huge goal that you have set for yourself, and then once you achieve it, you almost kind of pull back on the drive, the work ethic, the motivation, always being first person in, last person out, because you're like, well, that was a huge goal I set for myself. I achieved it. Even in your particular case, you achieve it even sooner than you had originally planned for.
Right.
And so there's almost, like I said, that championship hangover, where it takes you time to find that next major goal.
Right.
And so would you say you had that goal setting mindset, like the goal oriented mindset, for like long term, and then once that kind of happened and you saw the drawbacks to it, it shifted to a more day-to-day goal setting mindset? Or was it always a day-to-day mindset thing?
No, I think my mindset is always, how much can we do today? I listen to a lot of YouTube videos of Les Brown and Jim Rohn and some of those guys, Eric Thomas, and one of, I can't remember which one, but one of them made a comment one time about somebody wanted to take some time off of work, so he said he's going to work extra today so that he can have tomorrow off. And it's like, well, why don't you work extra every day and think about how much more you can put in? Or Kobe talking about, he gets up and he gets an extra workout in every day.
Oh yeah, the one where he's talking about the morning one.
Right. I mean, if you're going to put in a little bit more today so that you can have tomorrow off, why wouldn't you just do that every day and see how much better you can be? And I think that's the mentality you got to have. Now, I'm not great at that, but it's something that I'm trying to get towards. But I do think that is part of the thing, and I absolutely believe that rest is important. It's not rise and grind and kill yourself, trying to go after everything, but at the same time, you got to get up and do something. The more you get moving, the better off you're going to be just in general. For your mental health, for your physical health, for your family, for your career. I mean, you name it, you got to get up and you got to be doing stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you phrase it that way, like you had said, if you're willing to work harder the day before you have off, then why not do that constantly? And then also, to kind of tie into the point where the rest is important, that's such a difficult balance that I've seen that people struggle to find, and it's across the board, no matter what occupation you have, what goals are. That's a very difficult thing, and it's only starting to build popularity as of late, where there is this, I think, have you seen any of the interviews with, I believe his name is Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist that talks about how important the way that we sleep now is contrary to how it used to be.
I have no idea who that is.
So I don't know his accolades entirely off the top of my head. This is only somebody that I started getting into as of late, where he talks about, obviously everyone knows that it takes the human body about an hour and a half to 2 hours to reach what they consider REM sleep,
Right.
which is the most important cycle. He had started to notate that because people are so inclined to, like, we work so religiously during the day that we come home and we basically coast up until bedtime. Most of the population, what it actually is starting to cause is because we're not constantly working from the minute the sun rises to the minute the sun sets, it prolongs your ability to reach the REM cycle, and that when we are constantly moving, doing something, and it's not like you have to work out from the minute the sun starts to when it sets, but for example, when you get home and you sit on the TV for 4 hours after you get off work, that's dragging the REM process of your sleep cycle, and it's pushing it further out, so it's lessening how long you're in REM. And so that was something I found very interesting because it ties into your point where you should always be doing something. And it works two ways, because that's something where I started to realize that there is balance that's able, and it's something that's very natural to the human species.
For sure.
But yeah, so what is something that you felt you should have learned, like something that you would have taught yourself? Like, let's say you get the golden ticket. It's a cliche question. You get to go back and tell yourself one thing. I know some people don't even, like, I wouldn't tell myself anything because I don't know if I would be where I am now had I done that. But if you could, is there anything you would tell yourself? Like a younger version of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, for a long, long, long time, I worked 7 days a week, and the only thing that mattered was working and burning the candle at both ends, as they say. And that's just too much. There was a lot of learning and a lot of accolades that came out of that, but I also lost a lot of me, and I lost a lot of people in my life during that time. So I think that, once I had to step back and force myself to start taking a day off of work every day and rebalance, I think that made a huge difference. I think that's something that's important. I let the drive for success overtake too much. And really, it wasn't even a drive for success. It was a drive to prove others wrong. And it shouldn't even be about that. It should be about proving to myself what I'm capable of, which is what I do now. It's not about anybody else. It's about what I think I can do. So I think that was probably the most important thing that I wish I would have learned earlier. But I absolutely agree with you. I mean, if you change anything from the past, you wouldn't be where you are today. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that as well. But also, relationships are what it's all about. You win some, you lose some. Take care of people, take care of yourself, and just treat everybody as best as you can. And just try not to judge people. There was a long period of time where I was pretty judgmental of a lot of people, where I try not to be so much so anymore. So those are probably the two biggest lessons I wish I had learned many years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's a big thing. Like you had said, is kind of touching on the judging of people. This is something that I brought up. Me and my partner had brought up when we had done our podcast in Durango. Is that it has so many negative impacts that we don't see until you reach that enlightened stage where you go, I really shouldn't be doing this, because it makes it, like you had said, relationships are the end goal. It's incredibly difficult to create and maintain relationships when in that frame of mind. And that's something that I think globally everyone needs to work on, because you start to see it now in so many different ways where it's starting to seep into younger ages, and it's starting to show its face sooner than it would in the past, if you kind of follow where I'm going.
For sure. No, it's a problem. You don't, until you can understand where other people are coming from, and most of the time people don't, then you don't have the right to judge those people. So, and that's the thing. You gotta try to empathize with what they're going through. You don't have to agree with it, but try to understand that perspective. But it is not an easy thing to do by any stretch.
Yeah, is so, because I would say that's a thing that everybody struggles with on some level. What was what was it, a shift in your mindset that kind of went off? Was it like, what kind of spurred along your ability to shift that from that way, like being judgmental, or was it something you just kind of learned over time?
Oh, I wouldn't say that I've got it down now. I mean, it still happens. I mean, it happened earlier today. But it's just something that you have to be aware of and start to realize, like, hold on, you don't know why they're acting like that, why they're coming from that perspective, what they're going through and what they're thinking. But just different conversations where you come at people, and it all comes down to communication, where you felt a certain way about a situation that took place, and you get in an argument with them, and then you hear their side of it, and you go, oh, I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. And after a few of those kind of conversations, then you start to try to realize where they're coming from. A guy I used to work for in Illinois used to quote Steve Covey all the time with "Seek first to understand." So I mean, that's the thing, is that seek first to understand the point of view of the person you're having an issue with, and see what they're trying to come from and why they would be doing what they're doing, and then attack the situation from there.
Yeah, that's another thing that I'm a firm believer in, is that communication, in my eyes, is the single most important thing to a functioning person and in all a functioning society, because that's the first thing that goes out the window when everything else starts to go sideways.
Right.
I know that I can count on every appendage on my body how many relationships I've lost due to a lack of communication, or not communicating in a way that, like you had said, the other person could understand. And most people are unwilling to put forth the effort to understand your situation or where you're coming from, your point of view, so on and so on.
Right.
So I've learned in my personal experience, the easiest way to communicate is basically make it as digestible. And by no means I'm saying dumb it down, but make it to where it's not a 14-chapter book on why you feel the way you are. Like, boil it down so that way when you come into contact with people, and it makes it easier for you to communicate to them and for them to understand where you're coming from.
Right.
And so that's the pillar, because a lot of my relationships now are, and it sounds ridiculous, and it doesn't sound like it should be that big a deal, but I am not very big of an advocate of like text messages, because there are so many different ways you can read the same text message. Like, the way that it comes across may not be the same way you read it.
Right.
And so with my communications, it's always, I would rather call you and hear it in your voice, because that's other things that get lost through phone calls, text messages, and even with particular people, where if you don't understand the tone they're speaking or the message they're trying to parlay to you, it's another facet of that communication that can inhibit more negativity between the two people.
Right. Absolutely.
So I guess kind of staying in that vein, or kind of, I know you had touched on some of the people that you listen to like YouTube videos that you use for both motivation and for teaching purposes or learning purposes rather. Who would you say has been like? Is there or the few that you listed are those the most impactful people for you to listen to?
Oh, easily Les Brown and Jim Rohn. I mean, I listen to those guys every day. A couple of different things. Yeah, I mean, they're Jim Rohn has been dead for 20 years, and a lot of what he has to say is still relevant today. Um, but I mean, it's so good. I mean, and the way Les Brown speaks and his motivation is really good. I like Eric Thomas, but I mean those 2-3 guys are really good, just because they've got a lot of knowledge. Um, from Eric Thomas talking about I can, I will, I must. I mean that's a pretty tough thing to swallow, but that's the way it is. I mean, I can do this, I will do it because I must do it, no matter what it is. Um, and Jim Rohn kind of nails it on the head, in my opinion, when it comes to, the work ethic of life in general is, just you're here. If you're here, might as well get the best out of it. I just had to I give this speech, I swear, every 6 months to a group of kids, usually kids, but it's, people taking lessons, people at work. You're here. If you're here, you might as well give 100% to get the best out of it. Okay, mom and dad dropped you off and you don't want to play. Well, but you're here, so you might as well worry about it. Okay, fine, you just had a fight with mom on the way here. There's nothing you can do about it right now. You're here. Put your effort and your mind into what you're doing while you're here, and then you can go deal with it. Okay, fine, you have homework. You're not doing it right now. You're here right now. Work on and focus and give 100% effort into what you're doing right here, right now. Then move on to the next thing. This idea of multitasking, I think, has gotten out of control. You can't do 2 things at once. You can do one thing really well, get it done, then move on to the next thing. Put a plan together, time blocking, but and planning and multitasking, that you can do this thing, and while that's happening, you can move on to something else to come back to. But this whole attitude of I didn't want to do this anyway. Well, but you had to. You have to work. If you have to be at work, you might as well be the best at it.
Yep.
And so that's the thing. If you got to be at school, you might as well get something out of it. What are you doing while you're there? Learn. Don't just waste time. So, yeah, I mean, for sure, Les Brown and Jim Rohn, those guys are guys that I highly recommend people listen to.
Okay, yeah, because I would say for me, it kind of varies. I'm very quote oriented, so because that's stuff that when you're listening to just anybody in general, most of the time these powerful speeches that people listen to that give them the will to just this unrelenting will, this drive, this motivation, or whatever you may need. When those powerful speeches come through, they're awesome and they're meaningful, but it's almost always boiled down to a quote.
Right.
And so I'm very quote oriented, and in that I'm able to use quotes from so many different people. Like one that I live by day to day is Shaquille O'Neal's the smartest man in the room. Knows he's not the smartest man in the room.
Right.
Or like the one that I got for Christmas, which is Nipsey Hussle's, sometimes you got to take 2 steps back to then take 10 steps forward. And all these different quotes that are so powerful, that's something that I see fit. And I also really find I can, I will, I must powerful, because that's actually the first time I've ever heard it and also heard it explained. It's such a simple thing to teach yourself. Right. Like you said, you're there, you might as well make the best out of what you're doing.
Right.
And that's something that, like I had asked you, if there was something you could teach yourself, go back and tell yourself, or you wish you would have learned sooner. That is something I wish I would have learned sooner, because maybe things shake out a little bit differently.
Right.
It would have, for the school example, there became a point in time where I don't want to be here. So why would I do anything if I
Right.
don't want to be here? Well, because, like, to your point, because you're here,
Right.
you might as well make the best out of whatever situation you view it to be. And I think that's another important part of it is the perspective and the point of view you go at every situation. If you go into it thinking, oh, this is going to be terrible. Like, this was my high school mindset, and this is a mindset I've carried from most of my life and am still working on breaking out of is hope for the best, expect the worst. And it only was until you truly hit rock bottom where you realize how much of my situation came from just having that mindset. Because if you expect the worst, you're already building in an excuse for why you weren't able to get what you hoped for.
Yep. It's the law of attraction.
And actually, there's a do you know who John Jones is? Correct, the UFC fighter.
No, I'm not a UFC guy.
Okay. So John Jones is this guy. Then he was on Rogan's podcast, and this is something that really blew me away. So John Jones is by far the most talented professional fighter that will ever grace this planet. But he used to do this thing where every Saturday before his fight, he would get blackout drunk and do unrelenting amounts of cocaine. So that way, if he lost, he had an excuse. But there are certain people that were put on this planet with skills that no one else will ever maintain. So he never dealt with that. He always won.
Right.
But when you go through stuff like that, it almost further enforces the fact that, like, I really don't need to give a crap about anything.
Right.
Because I just walk in, do my business. I'm better than everybody else at it. I'm cool. So why would I work as hard as this person? And so it's definitely interesting to see how important perspective and points of view are when it comes to just day-to-day life in general.
Well, to answer that question, though, is it's not supposed to be a competition with anybody else. It's a competition with you. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter that you're the best at what you do. Can you be better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it comes down to. Can you be better at what you do, even if you are the best? And you have to have a sense of pride in yourself to do that. And I think that's what's lacking a lot of times. People want to do the minimum to get. What does it take to get by?
Yep.
And that's a mindset that I can't understand.
No.
Just doing minimums.
Yeah. That was something that. And the sad thing is, it's very common, especially in the workplace, where there's this. I've gotten into numerous disagreements with countless different people across all ages. I want a raise, but I'm going to work the same as what I work now, but I expect better compensation. And then when I get better compensation, that's when my work will go up.
That's not how it works.
No, not at all. And that's something that gets very lost in the hustle and bustle of normal society.
Well, and again, Jim Rohn is a perfect example. I mean, he talks about do more than what you're paid for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you do more than what you're paid for, eventually you'll be paid more for what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I am proof positive of that. So, I mean, I've seen it. I've watched it. It's happened to me. It is true, you know. Take pride in what you do and you will be rewarded.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the age-old saying, you're always expendable till you make yourself no longer expendable. And it's kind of in the same vein as that mindset where you have to prove your self-worth, and then once you've proven your self-worth, the compensation in all different forms and fashions will come to you.
Right.
And in a weird way, it kind of almost aligns perfectly with this attraction mindset, like the law of attraction, where if you believe in something, you're going to work for something.
Right.
And when you work for something, the thing will find you.
Right.
And so it's a very complex kind of, I guess you could say, I can't think of the term, like symbiotic relationship everything has with each other, I guess would be the way I would put it. Because it almost is this unrelenting kind of circle of life where if you do this, this will happen. And then if you do this, this will happen. And it almost always just follows in this kind of yin and yang pattern. So it's definitely an interesting thing to see. And like you said, it is proof positive with when you work and prove yourself more valuable than what you are at, someone will see your value.
Right.
And it may not be in what you're actively doing or where you're actively working, but maybe somebody from the outside says, holy hell, he's underappreciated at where he works for what he does. Let's give this person a call and say, hey, we see what you do. You are amazing at your job. Your work ethic is unrelenting. You have these sort of skills that we think would translate well. We would love for you to work here. Oh, and by the way, this is what we're willing to offer you in
Right.
return for your service.
Right.
So, are there any, kind of go on to the flip side of that, are there any people that you refuse to watch on the motivational side of things? I know like one in particular that's kind of a soft, like is a huge talking point for people is guys like David Goggins, who to the right person can be incredibly powerful in a positive manner, but then to the wrong person, it can be incredibly detrimental to them. Are there anybody that you just find don't work for you?
Yeah, I'm not a huge David Goggins fan. I mean, I listened to it. I appreciate what the guy has done, but I think he's a little insane, to be quite honest. I don't think you should push yourself as hard as that guy's pushed himself. I mean, good on him. He's accomplished a lot, and happy for the success that he's had. But I know a guy that's met him, and apparently he's not the friendliest guy on the planet either, because he thinks so much of himself because he's put himself through so much. And I guess that's not worth it to me to be that way.
No.
So, I mean, I think I get the point. Push yourself just when you think it's time to give up. Push yourself even harder. That's fine to a certain degree. Yeah, I go back and forth with Jordan Peterson. I like some of his stuff. Some of his stuff is just like, yeah, I don't think I can go there with you. And it's just my issues with him more than anything are just the fact that he tries to come across as if what he says is 100% truth, and if you don't believe what he believes, then you're an idiot. I have a hard time with people like that. He has some good insights on things that I can appreciate for sure. There are some things that I don't agree with. I can't have anything come to mind right now, but so I always, when I see his stuff, I tend to listen to it with a grain of salt to start with.
Okay.
But I mean, the reality is, I think you can pick a lot of stuff up if you're just looking for the message that you want to hear out of it. You're gonna get it. So it really doesn't matter who it is. I mean, Inky Johnson is another one that's an incredible speaker. The former football player. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are really good. I don't know if there's anybody that I try to avoid. You just have to know that you're not necessarily going to agree with everybody that you're going to listen to.
So then what okay, so I'm actually interested because I asked mom this, and she had no idea who he was until I had started showing her some of his stuff. Andrew Tate. Have you come into contact with any of his stuff? He falls somewhat in line with the Jordan Peterson kind of thing.
I'm not sure if I do. I feel like maybe I just recently saw something of his, but I haven't listened to him enough to
Okay.
have a thought on him one way or another. I think I did just watch something recently of his, but yeah, I don't have enough thought on him right now.
Okay. I just have to ask because, like I said, I feel like his fan base and the people that hate him are by far the most polar opposites, because you either are willing to die for his message or you're willing to kill his message, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I was just curious to see, because that's a huge one, especially as of now, that it's a very divisive kind of pick for people. I personally am in the same vein where I believe some of his stuff, but then there's other stuff I'm just like, you're completely out of your mind on. But I think that's the same way you need to be with everybody.
right.
Like, you can't go into trying to find somebody that works for you and identifying with everything that comes out of their mouth.
Again, Jim Rohn,
Mm-hmm.
be a student, not a follower.
Mm-hmm.
Study, learn, listen to all these people, and then make up your own mind.
Exactly.
It's not, I'm a follower of these people. No. I'm going to listen to what all these opinions are, and I'm going to form my own opinion based off of what I've learned
Exactly.
and what my values are to match.
Yeah, that's where I would say for me, the people that I find the most interesting to learn, to listen to, and to kind of take stuff from would be, I listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson. I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and then I would probably say that's it, outside of guys that are like in the music industry, and that's kind of just as they come and go, kind of situationally. Um, I think for
See, those guys to me, though, are people that are just wanting to talk about what's popular right now. I think like Les Brown and Jim Rohn and Eric Thomas and the guys that I'm listening to are trying to motivate you to be a better you.
mm-hmm,
And I think that's kind of where I go towards,
mm-hmm,
as opposed to trying to get people to change the way they view the world,
mm-hmm,
which is what the Joe Rogans and the Jordan Petersons of the world are trying to do, is get
mm-hmm.
you to think the way they think. It's like, well, okay, maybe. And so that's where I tend to avoid some of those types of people, and really, really gear more towards the people that are like, hey, how do you become a better you? Um, another quote is, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. How do you make yourself better, physically, mentally, financially? You name it. Every
yeah.
aspect of things. How do you improve yourself? And trying to convince people around you how to think and how to act. That has nothing to do with you, and that's not your place anyway. Try to make your life better. Try to make the people around you's life better. That's the most you can ask for at this point.
Oh, absolutely. See, the reason I like to listen to Rogan is because I align with him on kind of his shared learning mindset. If you kind of going back to what I was saying with the messages, I don't like to come into constant contact with concepts I agree with. Otherwise, it kind of in turn starts to enforce this echo chamber that you live in.
Right.
So the reason I really identify or listen to Rogan more than I would say I identify is with him. If you go into it like you had said, be a student, not a follower, you're going to come into contact with so many different ideas and thought process and concepts that I'm almost constantly, episode to episode, or however much of it I'm listening, I'm finding myself almost in my own mind kind of having this ideological war to kind of see where I believe or which side of the coin I identify with or agree with more. So that's a big thing for me, is always trying to come in contact with a lot of different views and perspectives, because I think that's really when you start to learn what works for you.
For sure. No, you got to try to see everything from every vantage point. Absolutely.
Yeah, so those are a few of the people that I tend to listen to. And I also think that as you start to mature, it almost enforces this shift where you stop looking so much at ideas and such that come into contact with you, but rather the stuff that works for you, if that makes sense. Because it almost takes you to come into contact with that stuff to learn what works for you, to finally then be able to start knowing what works for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but then are you learning, or are you just finding the things that are already what you're used to?
I guess it depends. Are you seeking out, or like, are you literally just going at it, or are you trying to really learn on what you agree with? Because you can learn more constantly about what you already agree with.
Sure.
It just may be more similar to being in an echo chamber.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, in that turn, my point would be null and void. Granted, I have only been on this earth for 22 years, so I myself am still doing some learning and soul searching. But I think that that's another critical part of growing, is forcing yourself to face combative ideas, and then not only that, but sometimes accepting you're wrong.
Right.
The way you think is incorrect, or there's a better way for you to think. So that's a big thing that I enjoy as well.
Right. You got to learn from everybody that you meet.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this is kind of something that I picked up from the podcast I did last weekend with Evan, Xander, and Derek. We did something at the very tail end where we basically shared what we are thankful for in 2022, something we're proud we learned about ourselves in 2022, and then something we're manifesting moving into 2023. So I will let you start, sir.
Thankful in 2022 for opportunities and support that I've had. This time a year ago, I was in Chicago, running a health club, teaching some tennis with some great people, trying to push me and helping build a phenomenal facility. Finally getting some things worked out with the staff there to where we were all on the same page and starting to grow. Was a whirlwind in the next 5 months, 6 months, that I got a call from somebody out in Kansas City that offered me an opportunity that in title was a step back, but also brought me closer to family. That I already said at the beginning, 2 promotions since then, taking me to a place that I long-term wanted to get to. Who would have thought that I'd get there in 6 months? And having the support of friends and especially family, continuing to push me and believe that the visions that I have and the motivations that I have are the right ones and where we're going and building, because it's all about the team and making the people around you better. So yeah, I guess I would say I'm thankful and grateful for all of those opportunities and those people. 2023 is going to be a challenge. This is a challenge that I've not faced before. I think that I'm fortunate to know a lot of people that will be able to help me learn the things that I need to learn. There's a lot of people in my corner that want to make sure that I succeed. My arrogance doesn't allow for me to fail when it comes to business. So I've got big plans for 2023 and what's going to come out of 2023. So that's what I see coming up in the next year.
All right. I like that one. Yeah. I pretty much already did mine, so mine's kind of relatively similar to yours, especially. Just thankful for the relationships I've maintained, that I've grown, that I've built, and then also thankful for the relationships that I've lost. There's a lot to learn from lost relationships. There's kind of everything has a funny way of working itself out. So I'm thankful for both, like I said, the relationships I've maintained, the relationships I've built, and the relationships I've lost. Something I'm definitely proud of within myself from the I kind of learned over the last year was this, in a sense, losing a almost too humble mindset, like not being able to understand that I'm more capable than I originally had thought coming into the year.
Right.
And that was something that I just kind of pinned off to, humility. And it was not benefiting me. So I had to almost kind of accept this kind of quiet arrogance, I guess you could put it. So that's something I'm very thankful that I've learned, because if that was the case, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't feel comfortable in some of the situations I am comfortable in now, taking charge, leading people in some areas. And then something I'm really manifesting for the next year is just this continued mission that every day I'm gonna learn something about myself, and something I can use to benefit my growth day in and day out, and making sure that it not only positively impacts my life, but the people I use as my support system, enabling them to both learn what works for them from me and what doesn't work for them, and to really kind of have this group of people that all share this conjoined agreement that we're going to push each other even when we don't want to be pushed. We're going to have this balance. We're going to have this understanding that, hey, so-and-so, you got to get up off your butt. You got to get to work. And so that's something that I myself am extremely looking forward to being able to start working on coming into the next year.
Yeah.
But I know you have stuff to do. I'm sure I'm going to get a phone call from somebody here in a while. Thank you, Jeff, for coming on.
Thank you.
Just let the people know if they want to watch or see any of your motivational stuff that you put out, however they can consume that, whether that be on Instagram, however they are able to see what you're doing.
JPC Mindset on Facebook. That's the best way to go.
All righty. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And we will get it out of here.